Hello, this is Erin again, and I am your emotional regulation and intimate communications coach. So, my last podcast in the series, I was talking about emotional dysregulation, some of the signs, and I'm going to be filling you in with a couple more details in this podcast. And I talked about the window of tolerance, which is a 1 through 6 scale that you can use to determine when you are emotionally dysregulated and you need to stop and take a break and get yourself re-regulated so that you can enter normal, polite society, or even just have deep and meaningful communications with the person that you're with, and be aware of yourself. Because if we have a pattern from trauma and past experiences where we're disconnecting from ourselves, then we disconnect from our emotions, we disconnect from the deeper parts of ourselves that we want to express and the parts that we want to be seen. Maybe even if we have some shame wrapped around it, everyone wants to be seen, everyone wants to be heard, everyone wants to be loved, and we all want connection. So that's why I do the work that I do. And as a coach, I've been doing life coaching for almost a decade. And I have asked myself recently, what is the biggest gift that I give my clients? And the thing is every foundation starts with emotional regulation and intimate communications. So I've had people come to me who want to be coached in their businesses and their personal relationships and trying to figure out what their purpose is in this life, all types of things, and addictions, all this. So the thing is it always starts in the same place. And I realize that is the best thing that I can offer people is this foundation. And then from there, sky's the limit. It's once you master these tools that I'm teaching in this series, then your business can get right. Then you can have a clear vision. If you are so distracted by emotional uprising inside of you, and that is just making waves crash down on you. So I can hand you the perfect business plan. Yes, here you go. If you do this, you will make millions of dollars. There you go. And let's just say that happened. But if every day you're waking up with crazy crippling anxiety, or you don't believe in yourself and you have all these shame triggers coming up and you're sabotaging all over the place, that business plan does not mean shit. It is not going to help you, because the real root of the problem lies in you regulating yourself. And once you're regulated, then paradrashtu swarupe vastanam, you can see reality as clearly as you can, because your insides don't have all this glitching happening. And even if that's happening, you can change your relationship with that internal distortion so you're not sucked into it. And you recognize, yes, this is happening because I'm a human. This is my current experience. But I know that if I breathe and I use my tools, that I can get through it. And then once I get through it, then I know that things will clear up and this is not permanent, so on and so forth. In Vipassana, we have a saying, anicca, which means that nothing is permanent. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about nonviolent communication, which I've talked about in some of my podcasts. But in this series that I'm sort of rebooting, the emotional regulation and intimate communications, nonviolent communication is a great way for us to express what we need in a way that's going to be received. And so that's why I'm such a huge fan of this work. When we're not expressing our needs, and everyone has needs, at any given moment, everyone has needs. Most of us have been taught to not have needs, that having needs is not okay. If you have too many needs, you're a burden, you're a bother, don't come over here with this, I'll give you something to cry about type of dialogue. And a lot of us grew up with this. And the thing is again, our parents, they were doing the best that they could, our mentors, the state that we were in. I find a lot of peace in recognizing that my parents are people, that they were just kind of, we start as babies and we get our coping mechanisms and a couple life lessons, and then we're bigger babies, kind of grown children, and hopefully we, spring into adulthood, our brains are developing. But my parents had me when they were in their early 20s, and I'm 40. And I'm God, I just feel maybe I can parent a child now. But like in my early 20s, oh my gosh, like I would have a daughter that would be recording podcasts like this probably to help people. So no shame to parents. Like we love them. And that's one of the first things a lot of times I talk about in coaching. People feel like, oh, I'm bad mouthing my parents. No, but let's acknowledge that they're human and that people make mistakes. Mistakes is part of learning. I was having a Malayalam lesson this morning with my teacher, and he was, you know what I really like about you, Erin? I was like, what? He's like, you're not afraid to just use the Malayalam that you know. I was like, yeah. He's like, you're not afraid of sounding silly. I was like, yeah, that's right. He's like, yeah. He's like, you're not afraid of sounding stupid. And I was like, thank you, I think. But truth is that we learn these tools, and part of the journey is that we're going to make mistakes. But try, as my martial arts teacher Deepak would say, maximum try. We always want to try to do good, try to do better, and that's going to vary on differing days. So if we're not expressing our needs, so maybe let's say we're not even aware of them. We're not even aware of them, but there's this sort of unsettled feeling, and we notice that maybe when we see other people meeting their needs, that we get triggered. I remember the day that my partner, Matt, he was expressing some needs that he had, and he's very like articulate and verbose. He has a very beautiful brain. He's on the spectrum. He talks about that often. And so he's able to articulate in a very beautiful, poetic way in ways that other people might not be able to. And I remember he was, saying like, this is what I need. Da, 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 da. And I remember in that moment feeling so triggered and so resentful. And when I paused and I asked myself, like, Erin, you love this man. Like, why do you feel so nasty towards him? And when I got quiet, what came up was, you just don't say that. You just don't say that. And I paused because I'm a person of self-study, swadhyaya, I'm a yogi. And so I thought, well, that's interesting. Like, let's explore that and unpack that a little bit. And so when I asked myself, like, why don't you say that, Erin? Like, why don't you? He wasn't expressing anything, crazy. He was expressing what he was feeling. And it was like, discontentment about something I had done or said. And when I checked in, why don't you say that? Oh, because that's unpleasant. And like, oh, that's going to burden. And when I explored that further, I realized that's not true unless I take it personal. And so what I learned is it's okay for other people to have an experience where maybe they're even mostly enjoying it, but there's certain aspects that they're not enjoying, and for them to verbalize. And some people are more verbal than others, certainly, but being able to accept that rather as like a personal criticism. I remember I had a student that said, I don't like India. I hated India. And I was like, all of a sudden I became the representative for India and yoga. I was like, what do you mean? How dare you? And it's so like just taking that personally rather than just really hearing them about it. I had to regulate myself, right? Which is what I talked about in the first podcast in the series. And then once I regulated myself, I was able to really hear him and his concerns, and I understood him. Not everybody likes India, not everybody likes yoga, not everybody will like you, and that's okay. That has less to do about you and more to do about them. I recently had some experiences where I have some people that are in my life that were just like terrified of intimacy, different kinds of intimacy. And I'm a very intimate person. And, them removing themselves from my life, or me removing myself from their life, had less to do about them and more to do about us kind of like meeting our own needs. So expressing needs. So once we learn how to acknowledge and just ask, like, what am I feeling? Like how I did in that exercise with my partner. Like, why do I feel that way? Why is that not okay? Getting curious is a really great mindset to adopt. So getting curious and looking at this objectively, like nothing has gone wrong here. You're not a terrible person. Why did you say that? Why are you feeling that way? That is part of swadhyaya, self-study, introspection, because that's how we figure ourselves out. And if we could do so with curiosity rather than shame or judgment, because shame or judgment kind of shuts things down. Like if you have shame or judgment, and if you're used to judging people, it might be quite the transition, but trust me, you can do it. It's just like connecting with your heart a little bit more, like from a heart-centered space and just from a space of discernment rather than judgment. Can I like ask myself about this and get curious as far as like, well, why might I do that? My past experiences. I have trauma. I have triggers. Oh, I forgot my tool. Oh, this, that. So then it helps you to figure things out and then come back to it a little bit differently. So let's say that you're able to acknowledge what your needs are. I have a need for space. I have a need for connection. I have a need for physical touch. So let's say that you become aware of that. Great. That's awesome, because a lot of times you can meet your own needs. And that's the thing about needs, emotional needs. Most of them you can meet. The only thing I would say roughly that you can't meet is something like companionship. People might, have disagreement about that, because you can certainly, once you feel at peace within yourself, you do feel less lonely. But I do believe that we're pack animals. And so I think companionship is one of those needs that I think you would need another person, or at least a pet or something, to be able to meet that need. So you've acknowledged your needs, become aware of them, and now you're trying to meet them. How do you meet them? Can you honor your need for space? So this is something I talk about often. If you need space, can you go into a private room? Can you shut the door? Like my partner and I, we have a lot of autonomy in our relationship, and I need space. And we've learned not to take it personally most of the time with each other. I need space from this. And so we just disconnect for a moment, go into separate rooms, one of us takes a walk, whatever, and then we come back and we've regulated ourselves. And this has helped us so much. For the first 3.5, 4 years of our relationship, we were fighting back and forth. And this is from people who have a lot of tools, have done a lot of self-study, and we're very passionate people. We're both black belts. We're both yogis. And so for us to back and forth, it was just difficulty applying the tools. And one of the first things that we learned to apply, once we really started getting into this work, was the space aspect. So space. So after you, let's say you take space, let's say another need that you might have is to be heard. That's a common one. Looking at why you haven't been heard. Is it because you're not speaking up? Is it you're not saying it? Or maybe you're communicating in a way like, I need you to this, or you never ... When you talk to people like that, they become defensive. It's true. So when you talk to people, you never this, and you always because that paints a sort of picture of people that if anyone was served in that way with an image like that of themselves, it's unflattering and they're not going to like to hear it. So being able to express the needs is really important. I have a need for intimacy. I have a need for transparency. I have a need for emotional safety. Things like this, typically people are going to respond a little bit softer. And then saying a request, which I'm going to talk about in the next podcast. So the takeaway from this podcast is to recognize that everybody has emotional needs, and that it might be something like space, to be heard, for justice, for safety. Acknowledging these aspects within you and trying to meet them yourself as much as you can. This helps you to figure out the ways in which, what does it look like to have those needs met? What does it feel like? Because when you get comfortable doing that for yourself, verbalizing it is going to be so much easier. And you're not just going to verbalize I have a need for You're also going to say, I have a need for physical intimacy, and that looks like fill in the blank. So you're going to have a sort of roadmap for people to follow, because otherwise you're giving them a lot of guesswork. Because intimacy for one person might look different for another person. Like physical touch for me, I like to be grabbed. I like big grabs and crush me into my body types of hugs. And some people I've been with, they like light touch and they just want their hair pet, and that's physical intimacy to them. Whereas my approach might be overwhelming. So that's just an example as far as why acknowledging yourself and asking yourself what you need and figuring that out first before you start verbalizing, or maybe in conjunction with verbalizing it to others, can be super helpful. So that's all for today's podcast. Start doing the work, doing that inner work, nonviolent communication. There's a great book, Marshall Rosenberg, Nonviolent Communication is his work, and you can check that out. He has a great audiobook on Audible and Google Reads, or you can download the book or get a hardcover or softcover book. And also I talk about it in my second book, which is Journey Through the Dark to Find Light, which is available on Amazon. You can get a paperback book, or you can get the download on Kindle. And just an announcement, if you're interested in going to India, we have an immersion happening 2025, June 3rd to the 16th. If you're interested in that, I have 3 more spots available on the wait list. Deposits are due, and if you pay in full by October 1st, you get $500 off, early bird special. If you're interested in attending any of my courses, including my coach course, which is happening October 16th to the 23rd, or my yoga teacher training, which starts in February of 2025 and goes all the way till August, then you can reach out to me, Erin at erincoach.com, and you'll get India 50% off. So if you roll in any of my courses, you get India 50% off. So I hope that you enjoyed this podcast, and I'm enjoying recording this series on emotional regulation and intimate communications. And see you next time. Namaste.
Thank you so much for listening. If you want to support the podcast and if it's helping you, please consider writing a review. You can go to iTunes or Google Play, go into the search bar and type in Thrive Yoga Fit Transformational Coaching, scroll down, and you can leave a review. This helps other people to find me as well as bumps us up in the search ratings. Also, this podcast is sponsor-free, so that means we don't receive anything for doing it. If you feel so inclined and this podcast is helping to support you and you want to return the favor and help to support any production costs of the podcast, feel free to give a donation to a Venmo link, Thrive Yoga Fit, or PayPal, Erin at erincoach.com. If you don't have the means, don't worry about it. We're not going anywhere. You're all good. But if you would like to give back, you can give back in those ways. Thank you so much. Namaste.